Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
One Piece Randomizer by Grey Ninja 27i. An ordinary boy dies and is reincarnated into the body of none other than Monkey D. Luffy, equipped with a randomizer system. What he doesn't realize is that this system doesn't just influence his life, it influences the entire world around him. The warlord of my channeler, What If Lord, Black Money Young Leon, Garrick Russell, Ben Brownlee, Case Clark, Tristan Ward, KSG, PL4YZ, Brian McKenzie. Join the channel membership if you will like to support the channel. Adios.
Ah shit, here we go again. Rain poured from the darkened sky, drenching the city streets in a cold, unrelenting torrent. The night was eerily quiet, broken only by the rhythmic splashing of water against the pavement and the occasional whoosh of a passing car. Amidst the downpour, a lone figure hurried across the intersection, gripping his coat tightly against the biting wind. This was Gray, an orphan and an ordinary office worker in his early 20s, worn out from yet another long day at work. Gray's mind was consumed by a swirl of mundane thoughts, deadlines, bills, and the grocery list he had yet to tackle. As he stepped off the curb, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Distracted, he fumbled to retrieve it, unaware of the blinding headlights speeding toward him from the left. A deafening horn pierced the rain-soaked night, but it was too late. Time seemed to slow as Gray turned his head, eyes widening in shock. The truck hurtled toward him, and in a single, brutal instant, everything went black. Gray's last memory was of the cold rain and the blinding light of an oncoming truck. Now, there was only darkness, deep, unending, and strangely peaceful. He felt weightless, floating in a vast, empty void, and for a fleeting moment, he wondered if this was what death truly felt like. No pain, no fear, just an overwhelming sense of nothingness. Gradually, a soft glow began to pierce the darkness. It started as a distant, faint pinprick of light but steadily grew, pushing back the shadows until it enveloped him completely. The sensation of floating ceased, replaced by the solid feeling of ground beneath his feet. Gray found himself standing in an endless expanse of light, its source coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. The air was warm and still, carrying with it a sense of calm that made it difficult to feel alarmed, despite having no idea where he was or how he had gotten there. "Am I dead?" he whispered, his voice barely audible in the vastness of the space. "Yes and no," came a gentle reply, as smooth and clear as a stream. Gray spun around to see a figure standing a few feet away, watching him with serene eyes. It was a beautiful woman with blue eyes, golden hair, and a soft smile. She appeared almost human, yet there was something ethereal about her, an aura of power and wisdom that transcended mortal comprehension. "Who are you?" Gray asked, his voice trembling slightly despite the comforting atmosphere. The figure smiled kindly. "I am a guide, a guardian of sorts. Some might call me a deity. My role is to oversee the passage of souls, helping them find their way as they cross the threshold between life and death." "So, I really am dead," Gray murmured, the reality sinking in. Strangely, he felt no fear, only quiet acceptance. After all, he had no family to leave behind and no lover to mourn. He had close friends, but he knew they'd shed a few tears, raise a glass in his memory, and then move on with their lives. In a manner of speaking, the guide replied, "Your life as Gray, the office worker, has indeed ended. But your journey doesn't have to end here. You've been given a rare opportunity, one that few souls are granted." "An opportunity?" Gray repeated, a flicker of curiosity stirring within him. "Indeed. Your soul has been selected to be reincarnated into a different world, with all your memories intact," the guide explained. "Reincarnated into a different world," Gray said, awe and wonder creeping into his voice. "Am I being chosen to save the world?" "No, you're not that special," the guide chuckled, her blunt words stinging a little. "Every once in a while, we choose a random soul to reincarnate to spice up the destinies of the world." Gray blinked, momentarily stunned by the guide's blunt response. "Not that special," he echoed, more to himself than to her. the excitement that had been building within him deflating slightly. But there was something oddly refreshing about her honesty. No grand destiny, no weight of the world on his shoulders. Just an ordinary guy given an extraordinary second chance. The guide's soft smile remained, though a hint of amusement danced in her eyes. I see you're not used to such straightforwardness. But I believe in honesty, even with souls that find themselves in a place like this. The truth is, while you may not have a heroic destiny written in the stars, the world you'll enter is full of limitless possibilities. How you choose to live there, what you choose to become, is entirely up to you. Gray considered her words, his initial disappointment giving way to a more grounded curiosity. So, if I'm not destined to be some kind of hero, what's expected of me in this new world? Nothing more than what you expect of yourself, the guide replied gently. You can do whatever you want. No one will stop or reprimand you for your actions. Now that you understand what's happening, let's begin the process of reincarnation, the guide said, producing a board that floated before Gray. The board displayed several columns, each with a few empty spaces waiting to be filled. World. Boons. 1, 2, 3, weapon, object, system. Let's see which world you'll be reincarnated into, she continued, snapping her fingers. Suddenly, names flashed rapidly in the world column, each one appearing for only a split second before being replaced by the next. Then, the names slowed and finally stopped, landing on words that made Gray's heart skip a beat. World of Sea, One Piece. The words glowed softly on the ethereal board, and for a moment, Gray couldn't believe what he was seeing. One Piece? He repeated, disbelief tinging his voice. You mean the One Piece? The world with pirates, devil fruits, and the Grand Line? The guide chuckled, a playful glint in her eyes. Indeed, the very same. It seems fate has chosen a rather adventurous world for you to explore. A world where the seas are vast and treacherous, where the strong thrive and the weak are swallowed by the tides. Excitement and anxiety bubbled up inside Gray. One Piece had always been one of his favorite mangas, so he knew all too well how perilous this world could be. It wasn't just the Grand Line that was dangerous. The entire world was rife with threats. Evil pirates, corrupt marines, and even seemingly ordinary people with hidden strength could seriously harm you and get away without any consciousness. As these thoughts raced through his mind, the guide observed him closely, nodding in appreciation. Unlike her previous summons, this one wasn't blinded by the thrill of reincarnation. Gray was taking this seriously, which gave her hope that this one won't disappoint her. Now that you know where you're headed, tell me, what boons would you like to choose for yourself? The guide asked with a smile. Wait, I get to choose my boons. I thought it would be random, like the world selection, Gray said, surprised. That used to be the case, the guide explained with a chuckle, scratching her chin. But we soon realized that randomizing boons either drastically reduced the survival rate of reincarnated souls or plunged the worlds into chaos too early and quickly. It became boring for us. So, we started letting reincarnated souls choose their boons, with a few restrictions if necessary. You can choose 3 boons, she continued, but remember to keep it reasonable. What should I choose? Gray pondered, mentally cycling through a ton of potential powers. But the guide's words about being reasonable made him reconsider. And here I was thinking of asking for Alien X's power set, he thought with a chuckle, not noticing how the guide's smile briefly turned strained before she sighed in relief. As he deliberated, another thought crossed his mind. Was choosing an offensive ability really the best option? After all, in the One Piece world, there were plenty of ways to fight, devil fruits, Haki, and various combat skills like martial arts or swordsmanship. What wasn't readily available, however, was intelligence. In his previous life, Gray knew he wasn't exactly a genius. Sure, he had at university, but he couldn't compare himself to someone like Robin, a true scholar, or Luffy, a combat genius who learned from every fight. Intelligence, particularly the kind that could give him an edge in this new world, seemed more valuable than sheer power. With this in mind, Gray made his decision. Lady Guide, can I get Lord of Wisdom? Raphael is my first boon? Raphael from the Tensura system, huh? The guide thought for a moment before sighing. Given the potential of this power, I'm almost tempted to reject it. But on the condition that you won't be allowed to ask for any other power from the Tensura system, I'll allow it. Thank you, Gray said with a smile. Although he was disappointed that he couldn't pair Raphael with Beelzebub, he was grateful to get such a powerful boon. Good, the guide said, snapping her fingers. In the next moment, Gray screamed as unbearable pain coursed through him, sending him writhing on the floor. After what felt like an eternity, the pain subsided, and Gray looked at the guide with questioning eyes. Seeing his confusion, the guide explained, in the world of Tensura, there are two ways to obtain skills. They are either born from within a person's soul, or they are gifted. However, gifted skills are often inferior to those born from the soul. I won't allow you to have an inferior boon, so I strengthened your soul to make it capable of holding an ultimate skill, then made it manifest from within. Gray nodded, calming down as he noticed that Lord of Wisdom, Raphael, was now listed as his first boon on the board. So, what's your next boon? The guide asked. For my next boon, I want an unlimited inventory, Gray said. Huh? That's a rather simple request compared to your first one, the guide remarked as she added inventory to the list. It's simply for convenience, Gray replied. I want to have all my useful and important things on hand at all times. Besides, in a world full of pirates, you don't want to leave your belongings lying around. Fair enough, the guide nodded. And now for your last boon, what will it be? What else do I need in the world of One Piece? Gray wondered, his mind racing. Then, it hit him, disease. He remembered how many characters in One Piece succumbed to illnesses. Even the Pirate King, Roger, was dying of an incurable disease. With that in mind, he knew what his third boon would be. As my third boon, I want a healthy body that is immune to any and all diseases and illnesses, and that has rapid recovery from injuries and fatigue, Gray requested. Another good choice, the guide nodded, adding perfect healthy body to the list. With your 3 boons selected, it's time to choose your weapon or object, the guide said. But let me warn you, be specific in what you want. Many reincarnated souls have met their end by the very weapons or objects they chose, used against them. In that case, it's good that I already know what I want, Gray replied with a cheeky smile. I want a top-of-the-line smartphone from my original world, with an unlimited battery and internet connection that links back to my old world. I also want it to be enchanted with unbreaking protection and loyalty. Oh, that's an interesting choice, the guide smirked at his request. Is there a specific reason you chose this? Well, as you know, the story of One Piece isn't finished in my original world. I want to keep up with the manga so that if Oda-sensei suddenly decides to add a new element, I won't be caught off guard, Gray explained. Plus, having internet access in a world like One Piece could be incredibly useful. Combined with Raphael, it would be a treasure trove of knowledge for me. Fair enough, the guide nodded. However, while I'm allowing you to keep this smartphone, you are not permitted to contact anyone from your old world in any way. No texts, calls, comments, or anything that could reveal your presence. Is that clear? Yes, ma'am, Gray replied, and the word smartphone appeared on the board. Now that we've covered that, let's see what system you'll get, the guide said, a large roulette wheel. I guess this isn't something I'll get to choose, Gray mused aloud. We tried letting reincarnated souls choose their own systems, but the guide frowned in disappointment. Too many chose systems related to harems or other less than noble pursuits. So, we decided that giving you the choice of boons and objects was enough privilege. Now, let's see what you get, the guide said as she spun the wheel. After a few seconds, it slowed and finally stopped on the words. Randomizer system. Well, the randomizer system. The guide said enthusiastically. This could be one of the best or one of the worst systems, depending on the rewards you get. It's a gacha type system where you use points to roll for rewards. For your system, each roll will cost you 1,000 points. Now, you're probably wondering how to earn points. There are 4 ways, the guide continued. First, you receive daily points upon waking, 10 points a day. Second, by killing others. The number of points depends on the person's power and value in the world. The third and fourth ways are tied to hidden objectives and achievements. You'll earn points based on how significant they are. So, now that you understand everything, it's time for you to be on your way, the guide said as Gray's body began to glow. Live a good life and make sure to entertain us. Okay. Bye. The last thing he saw was the guide's gentle smile as the world around him dissolved into light. The next time Gray opened his eyes, he found himself in an unfamiliar room. Where am I? He wondered as the memories of meeting a deity and being reincarnated into the world of One Piece flooded back. But now, he faced a new question. Where exactly was he? As he was pondering this, a knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Luffy, get up, it's morning already. I'm up. Give me a minute, he instinctively replied, only to freeze as the realization hit him. His mind caught up with what had just happened, and his eyes widened in shock. He scrambled out of bed and rushed to the nearest mirror. Staring back at him was the face of a young boy with shaggy black hair, round black eyes, and a scar with 2 stitches underneath his left eye. What the fuck, to be continued. What the hell is going on? Why am I in Luffy's body? Luffy shouted as he stared at his reflection in the mirror. Wasn't I told I'm not some chosen one? That I don't have to save the world or anything? So why, of all people, am I in Luffy's body? As the former Gray, now Luffy, grappled with his existential crisis, there was another knock at the door. Letting out a sigh, Luffy walked toward the door, thinking, it must be Deiden or Makino. But when he opened it, he froze, stunned at the sight of the slender woman with long, wavy pink blonde hair standing before him. What the hell? He shouted in his mind. Why is Portgas de Rouge here? No, more importantly, how is she here? Wasn't she supposed to die giving birth to Ace? Rouge, noticing Luffy standing there looking a bit dazed, frowned and placed her hand on his forehead. What's wrong, Luffy? Are you sick? Just give him some meat. That'll cure whatever he's got, came another voice, startling Luffy once again. He turned toward the sound and saw a young girl of medium height with bright purple eyes and long hair, white on the left side and red on the right. Uda? Okay, now I'm completely lost, he thought, but then he noticed both Rouge and Uda frowning at him. Sorry, I'm not feeling well, so I'm going to rest in my room for a bit, Luffy said quickly before retreating back to his room. Meanwhile, the 2 women outside his room stood there, stunned by what they just witnessed. When did that guy get so polite? Uda exclaimed, throwing her hands in the air. Rouge just smiled and shook her head. Maybe our Luffy is starting to grow up, she said, flashing a teasing smile at Uda. Maybe you should think about doing the same. Nah, too much work, Uda scoffed, flipping her hair. Since Luffy's sick, I'm heading to the village to see if I can finesse some money out of the visiting merchants. Fine, but be careful and don't get into trouble, Rouge called as Uda left the house. Then she turned toward Luffy's door, whispering, I hope he gets well soon. Meanwhile, inside the room, Luffy sat on his bed, clutching his head. Where the hell am I? He thought, trying to make sense of why 2 people, one of whom should have been dead, were here. Suggestion. There are 2 distinct possibilities for the Master's predicament. Huh? Who said that? Luffy asked, looking around, trying to figure out where the voice had come from. Answer. I am Raphael, one of the boons the Master received from the guide. Oh right, sorry, I forgot about you, Luffy said, rubbing the back of his head. So, what are the possibilities you're suggesting? Answer. The first possibility is that Master is in an alternate timeline of the One Piece world, where certain aspects differ from Master's memories. That could be the case, Luffy mused, rubbing his chin. And the second? Answer. The second possibility is that the randomizer system, which Master received as a gift from the guide, is affecting the world around you. Oh right, I got something like that too, didn't I? Luffy sighed, wondering if this system was going to cause more trouble than it was worth. So, do I have a stat page or anything similar to see what else I have? Answer. Yes, there is a stat page. Would Master like to see it? Yes, Luffy replied, and immediately, a transparent window appeared before him. Name. Monkey D. Luffy, Gray, age. 19 boons. Lord of Wisdom. Raphael. Inventory perfect healthy body powers, abilities. N. A system. Gacha roll points. 1000 titles. The boy who inherited will. The charismatic prince. Well, everything looks normal except for the age. From what I know, Luffy set sail at 17, but it seems that's not the case here, Luffy thought to himself. Now, what exactly are these titles? He said, clicking on the first one. The boy who inherited will. This title is given to the person destined for a great adventure and fated to meet great people. As Luffy read the description of his first title, he couldn't help but glance at the straw hat resting on the table near his bed. Shaking his head, Luffy decided not to dwell on that for now and clicked on his second title. The Charismatic Prince. This title is given to a person with unbelievably high charisma. The title holder often makes a strong first impression and finds it easier to befriend others. Additionally, the holder of this title can more easily gain the trust of those they befriend. No wonder Mihawk said that Luffy has the ability to make allies out of everyone around him, Luffy mused aloud. Just then, another thought crossed his mind. Hey, Raphael, why don't I have any memories of Luffy before I woke up in his body? Answer. Integrating the host's memories with the master is a painful procedure. It's held off until the master's permission is obtained. Well, you might as well do it now, Luffy said. There's no point in dragging this out any longer. Notice. Starting process for integrating host's memories. Warning. The painful process is about to begin. Luffy heard these words in his mind, and in the next moment, an unbearable pain assaulted his brain, giving him a head-splitting migraine. My head. Luffy groaned, clutching his head. I'm going to lie down for a bit, he said, and a few moments later, he passed out. 2 hours later, when Luffy opened his eyes, he immediately noticed two things. The first was the influx of new memories now swirling in his mind, which he desperately needed to sort through before leaving the room. The second was the dampness on his cheeks, a result of reliving the painful memories during the integration process. Shaking his head, Luffy wiped his face and closed his eyes again, settling into a meditative position. He focused on organizing the newly acquired memories, ensuring they wouldn't overwhelm him. After half an hour of intense concentration, he finally managed to make sense of the memories. He now had a clearer understanding of his current situation. First, he found that this Luffy's background was similar to what he knew from the manga, as Garp was his grandfather and Dragon was his father, a detail he picked up from Garp's absent-minded remarks during their conversations. The differences began to emerge from Luffy's encounter with Shanks. While many events unfolded as they did in the manga, such as Luffy stabbing himself under the eye and Shanks losing his arm to save Luffy, this Luffy hadn't eaten the Gomu Gomu no Mi, or as it was recently revealed, the Hito Hito no Mi, model. Nika. As a result, he was slightly taller and more muscular than his manga counterpart. Uta, who also came along with Shanks's crew, had a different fate in this world. She didn't eat the Uta Uta no Mi, nor was she left on Elegia. Instead, Shanks encountered Rouge, who was somehow living on the mountain with Ace. Deciding it was safer for Uta to stay with Rouge, Shanks left her there. Later, Garp discovered Uta's identity and, in an attempt to annoy Shanks, kept trying to recruit her, Luffy, and Ace as Marine officers. All three children strongly disagreed with his plans and made their objections quite clear. Another significant change was Luffy's relationship with Ace, which started positively from the beginning, thanks to Rouge's presence. Once Luffy began living with them, Rouge quickly adopted him as her second child and Yuta as her third. From there, events followed the canon. Sabo's arrival, their becoming sworn brothers, the Grey Terminal fire, Sabo's death, and everything else that had happened in the canon up to that point. However, there was a key difference in their ages. In this timeline, Ace decided to set sail at 20, so Luffy and Uta chose to follow in his footsteps, planning to embark on their own journey the following year when they reached that age. After sorting through all this information, Luffy reached a conclusion. Nothing in this timeline made sense, and he would have to adapt as circumstances unfolded. With a sigh, Luffy opened his inventory and retrieved his smartphone. I wonder how useful this will be now out differently from how Oda-sensei is writing them, he said, staring at the device in his hand. Hey, Raphael, can you sync yourself with the voice of the world? Luffy asked. Negative. Request to access the voice of the world is being rejected and blocked. Hearing Raphael's response, Luffy frowned. Looks like Raphael is restricted in more ways than one, he muttered. Can you sync with the randomizer system in this smartphone? Affirmative. It is possible to sync both the randomizer system and Master's smartphone. How long will that take? Luffy inquired. Answer. Estimated time to sync both is 1 week. Then get started on that, Luffy said, returning the smartphone to his inventory. I'll do my first roll once you're synced with the system, to avoid any unexpected surprises. Now, I should really show my face outside before they start worrying about me, Luffy said, placing his straw hat on his head and stepping out of his room. This is the first time Luffy has stayed in his room for so long. Rouge frowned, glancing out the window at the setting sun on the horizon. I really hope whatever sickness he's feeling isn't anything serious, she said, anxiously fidgeting with her fingers. Rouge's worry deepened as memories of her late husband, Roger, resurfaced. The pain of losing him to an illness that no one could cure still lingered in her heart, and the thought of Luffy, her son in everything but blood, being similarly afflicted made her chest tighten with fear. She was lost in these thoughts when the door to Luffy's room creaked open. Rouge turned, relief flooding her at the sight of Luffy stepping out with his usual grin. There was a calmness in his demeanor, though something about him seemed subtly different, a faint maturity she hadn't noticed before. Sorry to worry you, Rouge, Luffy said, scratching the back of his head. I'm feeling a lot better now. Rouge's eyes softened, but her concern didn't completely fade. Are you sure, Luffy? You've never been sick before, and now you suddenly have a fever? Yeah, it was just a headache. I think I needed some rest. But I'm all good now, Luffy assured her, giving her a thumbs up. Rouge studied him for a moment, her motherly instincts still on high alert, but she nodded. If you're sure, but if you feel anything strange, promise me you'll tell me right away. Promise, Luffy said, smiling warmly. He appreciated her concern, something he hadn't felt this deeply in his previous life as Gray. But in this world, it was clear that he aka Luffy was surrounded by people who genuinely cared for him, and he didn't want to cause them unnecessary worry. Good, Rouge replied, her expression softening further. Dinner will be ready soon. Why don't you wash up? And check on Uda if you see her. She mentioned something about heading to the village earlier. Luffy nodded, giving her a quick wave as he made his way out. As he left the house, he let out a small sigh of relief. His encounter with Rouge had gone smoother than he'd anticipated. However, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about his interaction with her seemed a little odd. Hey Raphael, Luffy called out internally. Do you know why I was feeling so bad for making Rouge worry? And what was that protective love I was feeling towards her? Shouldn't I be, more distanced and detached from her since this is the first time I'm meeting her? Answer. The emotions you are experiencing towards Rouge are a result of the memory integration process. When your consciousness merged with the host's body, emotional ties, especially those rooted in deep bonds like familial love, were also transferred. Luffy frowned, processing this information. So, you're saying that I'm feeling this way because Luffy's feelings have been mixed with mine? Affirmative. The host's emotions are strong, particularly towards those he considers family. Although you retain autonomy over your thoughts and decisions, the emotional connections and instincts of the host will influence you, especially in relationships that Luffy held dear. Luffy sighed, running a hand through his hair as he mulled it over. It made sense, in a way. He had access to Luffy's memories and experiences, so it wasn't too surprising that his emotions would bleed over as well. But it still felt odd to suddenly be so protective of someone he had technically just met. So, I'm basically stuck with these feelings, huh? Luffy asked, his tone resigned. Affirmative. These feelings are now a part of you as long as you inhabit this body. It's also worth noting that the strength of these emotions may change depending on your interactions with the individuals in question. Luffy nodded to himself, accepting the explanation. I guess that's not the worst thing in the world. It just caught me off guard, that's all. Understood. Consider these emotions an asset rather than a burden. They may help you navigate relationships that are crucial to your survival and success in this world. Luffy couldn't help but chuckle at that. Yeah, I guess you're right. It's just one more thing to get used to in this crazy situation. Hey, Luffy, just then, his train of thought was interrupted by a loud, cheerful shout. He turned towards the voice and saw Uda lazily walking toward him. Good to see you finally out of your room. Yeah, I'm feeling good too, Luffy replied with a smile. Are you sure you're all right? Uda asked. Maybe you should rest a little longer. Thanks for worrying, but I'm really fine. Luffy grinned at her and ruffled her hair, which worked like a charm as she slapped his hand away with a sharp glare. Who's worrying about you? I just don't want you spreading your sickness to me, Uda scoffed. By the way, what are you doing here? I was actually looking for you, Luffy replied. Rouge told me to find you and call you for dinner. Oh, why didn't you say so earlier? Let's go then, Uda smiled, and the two of them started walking toward the house. So, how was your day? Luffy asked while walking beside her. Anything exciting happen? No, not really, Uda said, but then she suddenly stopped and turned around, scrutinizing Luffy with a critical eye. Luffy, what's going on? Why are you acting so different all of a sudden? What do you mean by weird? Luffy asked, trying to keep his tone light and casual while masking his anxiety at her question. I don't know, you've just been acting different ever since you got sick. Uda's frown deepened as she stared at him sharply. You're talking more, asking questions you usually wouldn't, and you're way more polite. She said the last word as if it were something alien to her when associated with Luffy. Luffy laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his head in a familiar gesture. Maybe I'm just a little off because of the headache earlier. It was pretty bad, but I'm feeling a lot better now. Maybe I just needed to rest, and it's made me think a bit more, you know? Uda eyed him suspiciously, clearly not entirely convinced. You've never been one to overthink things, though, she pointed out. Luffy, please, what's going on? You know you can tell me if something's troubling you. Luffy sighed inwardly, realizing that Uda wasn't going to let this go easily. He needed to come up with a reason that wouldn't raise more red flags. Well, maybe I've just been thinking about how lucky I am, he said, deciding to lean into the emotional aspect Raphael had mentioned. I mean, I've got you, Rouge, and everyone else looking out for me. It made me realize I should probably do a better job of showing my appreciation. On top of that, since we've decided to set sail next year, I've been thinking about what kind of captain I want to be, he added. And although I don't have all the answers yet, I think being a little more sensible will be better for us and our future crew members than my usual reckless behavior, he ended with a chuckle. Uda blinked, her tough exterior softening just a little. That's actually kind of sweet and thoughtful, Luffy, she said by her own words. But it's still weird hearing you say stuff like that. Guess I'm just full of surprises, Luffy said with his signature grin, trying to deflect the conversation with a joke. Uda stared at him for a moment longer before sighing and shaking her head. Fine, whatever. Just don't get all mushy on me, okay? It's weird enough having you act all polite. Luffy chuckled, feeling a sense of relief as the tension eased. No promises, he teased, draping his arm over her shoulder and earning a half-hearted glare from Uda. Come on, let's get back before Rouge starts worrying, she said, pushing him away before turning on her heel and continuing down the path. Luffy followed, feeling like he had just dodged a bullet. It was clear he needed to be more careful about how he acted. Then again, if I try too hard to act like the old Luffy, it'll just make everyone more suspicious, Luffy thought to himself. Despite this, he couldn't help but feel good seeing Uda care about him. Luffy, you're really one lucky son of a bitch, to have so many people who love and care about you, Gray thought to himself, smiling as he thought about the person whose body he was inhabiting and made a resolve to make sure that he got 110% from his second chance at life. To be continued. Unexpected bonding featuring Uda, Garp and Rouge. Raphael, system. It had been nearly a week since Gray transmigrated into Luffy's body, and the reality of his new life was gradually beginning to sink in. The awkwardness of interacting with Rouge and Uda also started to fade as he grew more comfortable in his new identity as Luffy. He quickly grew accustomed to the routine of life in Fuchsia Village, though the emotional connections he felt toward those around him continued to catch him off guard. Whether it was Makino, the barmaid whom Luffy saw as an older sister, or Deiden, who helped Rouge raise him, Ace, and Uda. Luffy loved them all dearly, like his own family. Now, Gray could feel those bonds influencing his own emotions and decisions. Over the week, Luffy also began testing the waters with his other boons, subtly exploring the extent of his abilities. He discovered that the perfect healthy body boon granted him exceptional physical resilience and strength. Although it wasn't on par with the rubber devil fruit powers that Luffy originally had in the manga, it was still enough to give him an edge over ordinary combatants in this part of the sea. Meanwhile, the inventory space appeared to be infinite, just as he had requested from his guide during the reincarnation process. Additionally, there seemed to be a stasis enchantment within the inventory that halted time for any items placed inside. Unfortunately, Luffy could only store non-living things, so it couldn't be used to protect or shield an injured crewmate. Overall, Gray was pleased with his gifts and with how well he was transitioning into Luffy without drawing attention. However, what he didn't realize was that Luffy's sudden change in behavior hadn't gone unnoticed at all. The people around him, especially Rouge and Uda, noticed the subtle changes in his behavior, like his increased thoughtfulness and more measured approach to decisions. In the end, they seemed to chalk it up to his growing maturity as he prepared to set sail the following year. However, throughout the week, the more they observed Luffy, the more baffled they became by this new version of him. Luffy also started doing and saying things he'd never done before. For example, Rouge nearly choked when Luffy announced he should learn to cook, and actually managed to make good-looking, tasty food on his first try. Yuta and Makino were left dumbfounded when he complimented a visiting merchant's daughter, and were even more shocked when she flirted with him and he flirted back. By the end of the day, no one knew what was going on with Luffy, so they just assumed it was another one of his usual absurdities. What they didn't know, however, was that before coming to this world, Gray had been an ordinary man with an ordinary salary. Eating out every day wasn't easy on either his wallet or his health, which forced him to learn how to cook for his survival. Additionally, having worked in a customer-facing job, the playful exchange with the merchant's daughter was nothing more than a casual interaction between two strangers for him. Overall, life was good and normal, until today, when a legendary hero decided to visit his grandson. "Raphael, how much more time is it going to take to sync the system?" Luffy asked, sitting in his room, spinning his straw hat on his finger. Answer: "Approximately few more hours. It's all right then, it's not like I'm in a hurry or anything," Luffy replied, knowing there was no point in rushing Raphael since he knew that Raphael was always working at maximum efficiency. "What about my smartphone?" Luffy asked. Answer: "Synchronization with a smartphone is already complete." "Great. In that case, could you start searching for techniques from other fictional worlds that might be adaptable here?" Luffy requested. He knew that many techniques from anime and comics were impractical or tied to power systems that couldn't exist in this world, but he believed there might be some that could be adapted. So he tasked Raphael with finding them. Notice: the search for optimal techniques has begun. Just then, the door to his room swung open, and as usual, Uda walked in without knocking or asking for permission. "Oi, Luffy! Rouge called you for breakfast," she shouted as she entered. Luffy sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Uda, would it kill you to knock or ask for permission before barging in? What if I was changing or, I don't know, doing something worse?" he added, wiggling his eyebrows suggestively. "Oh, please," Uda replied with an unimpressed expression, showing no sign of embarrassment. "It's not like I'd see anything I haven't seen before. And remember, I've seen you pick your nose, so I'm not exactly going to be attracted to you." "Thanks for the vote of confidence, sister," Luffy said dryly. "Why are you so shameless?" "Shanks raised me during the impressionable years of my life," Uda said matter-of-factly, as if that explained everything. "Anyway, come on, I'm hungry," she said, grabbing Luffy by the arm and dragging him out of the room. Luffy let himself be pulled along, smiling at the banter. Despite the constant teasing, he was starting to enjoy the dynamic between him and Uda. For a former orphan like him, all these interactions were quite heartwarming. As they walked down the hallway, Luffy glanced at Uda. "You know, one day I might actually surprise you by locking the door. And I'll just kick it down," Uda shot back without missing a beat, grinning mischievously. Luffy chuckled, shaking his head. "You're impossible. And you love me for it," Uda teased, draping her hand over his shoulder as they entered the kitchen. Rouge looked up from the stove, smiling warmly at the two. "There you are. I was starting to think you'd sleep through breakfast." "Blame Uda," Luffy said with a grin. "She took her sweet time coming to get me." "Only because someone takes forever to get ready in the morning," Uda retorted, sticking her tongue out at him. Rouge laughed softly, shaking her head at their playful bickering. "All right, you two. Sit down and eat before the food gets cold." As they sat down at the table, the doors suddenly slammed open with a thunderous bang, startling everyone. Standing in the doorway was none other than the marine hero, Vice Admiral Monkey D. Garp. "Oi, Luffy!" Garp's booming voice filled the room as he strode in with the force of a hurricane. "I hope you are not slacking off, otherwise, I will give you the taste of my fist of love." Luffy nearly choked on his food, quickly swallowing before looking up at the imposing figure of his grandfather. "Gee, Grandpa." What are you doing here? He stammered, trying to compose himself. Garp grinned, a mischievous glint in his eyes. What, I can't visit my grandson? He asked, knuckling his head. Uda snickered from her seat, clearly enjoying Luffy getting harassed by Garp. Good morning, Gramps, she said casually, clearly used to Garp's dramatic entrances. Morning, Uda. Garp replied with a hearty laugh before turning his attention back to Luffy. He crossed his arms, eyeing his grandson critically. But you do seem a bit different. What's going on with you? Rouge, who had been watching the exchange with a fond smile, decided to step in. Garp, don't be too hard on him. Luffy's been going through some changes. He has matured a lot since you saw him last time. He's been more thoughtful and responsible lately, unlike you, Garp. Garp raised an eyebrow, his expression a mix of skepticism and amusement. You thinking? Now I know something's up. Garp, stop harassing your grandson and join us for breakfast, Rouge said and served Garp his share of food. Fine, Garp said as he took a seat at the table. By the way, we are going to spar after breakfast to make sure that you are not slacking off. Spar? Right after breakfast? Luffy's eyes widened slightly, a bead of sweat forming on his forehead after all he had seen in Luffy's memories how brutal this devil grandfather was. Uda burst into laughter, clearly enjoying Luffy's predicament. You're in for it now, Luffy. GEP up with Gramps. What are you laughing at? You're coming along too, Garp said, effectively dampening Uda's cheerful mood. She looked stunned for a moment before glaring at Luffy as if it were his fault they were being dragged into Garp's plans. Rouge, can I get seconds? Luffy asked, hoping this wouldn't be the last time he'd enjoy Rouge's heavenly cooking. After breakfast, Garp led Luffy and Uda outside the cabin, and the trio began walking through the forest, searching for a good spot to spar. Ah, what beautiful weather! Garp laughed heartily, clapping his fist into his palm with a resounding smack. I'm going to have more fun than usual pummeling you too. Meanwhile, Luffy and Uda, trailing behind him, exchanged nervous glances. Garp's enthusiasm was anything but reassuring. Luffy, do something, Uda hissed, jabbing him in the side. What do you want me to do? Luffy shot back, poking her in return. Ha ha ha. You two are as lively as always. Garp's laughter echoed through the forest. You'll make fine additions to the Marine ranks. If only that idiot Ace had listened to me and joined the Marines. Like that would have done anything after they learned who he really is, Luffy muttered under his breath, his voice barely above a whisper. Unfortunately for him, Garp's sharp senses picked up the remark. The Marine hero stopped in his tracks, turning to glare at Luffy with an intensity that sent a shiver down Uda's spine. What was that, brat? Garp demanded, his tone devoid of its usual cheerfulness. Luffy sighed but decided to stand his ground. You know exactly what I'm talking about, Gramps, he said, meeting Garp's glare without flinching. Once your precious Marines figure out who Ace really is, do you really think they'll care if he's a Marine or not? Luffy. Uda's voice trembled slightly as she instinctively grabbed his sleeve, her eyes darting nervously between her brother and their grandfather. For a long moment, Garp's eyes bore into Luffy's, the tension between them palpable. Then, with a low grumble, Garp turned and continued walking, though his usual jovial mood was noticeably absent. Luffy and Uda followed in silence, the atmosphere between them heavy with unspoken words. After a few minutes of tense silence, Luffy spoke up again, his voice low but firm. I know why you want us to join the Marines, Gramps. It's because of our fathers, isn't it? Garp sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. So, you know who your father is, huh? I mean, there can't be that many monkey D's in the world, Luffy replied dryly. Garp glanced back at him, his expression a mix of frustration and resignation. Well, if you're so smart, then why are you resisting so much? Because it doesn't matter who I am, or who Uda is, Luffy answered, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. At the end of the day, your precious organization and its leaders will never see us as individuals with our own sins and virtues. To them, we'll always be tools. To hurt our fathers, or to serve as symbols for their propaganda. Garp's steps slowed as he absorbed Luffy's words. A flicker of pain flashed in his eyes, quickly masked by a stern frown. You think I don't know that? He muttered, more to himself than to Luffy. But with enough achievements, they'll have no choice but to acknowledge you for who you are. Luffy could sense the conflict within his grandfather. He knew Garp wanted to protect them, to give them a future that wouldn't be overshadowed by their heritage. But he also knew that Garp's faith in the Marines was unshakable, even if it was misplaced. After all, he saw this very man restrain himself when Ace was going to get executed at the hands of a Marine. I respect you, Gramps, and I know you're trying to do what's best for us. But the Marines aren't the answer, not for me, and not for Uda, Luffy said as he grabbed Uda's hand and gave a light squeeze. Garp stopped walking, his back to them, and let out a deep sigh. You've grown up more than I realized, Luffy, Garp said quietly, his voice devoid of its usual bluster. But the world out there is harsh. You got to be strong, stronger than you can imagine, if you're going to survive it. The Marines would give you that strength. Garp knew his grandson was destined for greatness. He could see the fire that burns within his grandson, similar to his father and himself. He knew that just a few years under Zephyr and his grandson would be a force to be reckoned with. Luffy shook his head, a small, sad smile on his lips. Strength doesn't just come from power or training, Gramps. It comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for, he said. If I can't achieve my dreams, then what's the worth of this life you're trying to give me? Garp stared at him for a long moment before nodding slowly. I see. Just, make sure you know what you're doing, boy. The world doesn't go easy on fools. With that, they finally found a clear opening for their spar. Later that evening, Luffy and Uda sat in his room, both of them battered and bruised. Each nursing their wounds with ice was the usual scene after their sparring session with Garp, which always leaves them sore and exhausted every time. Your grandfather is a demon. Uda whined, wincing as she pressed an ice pack to her leg, and every ache in her body seemed to amplify her frustration. Luffy chuckled weakly, wincing as he adjusted the ice pack on his shoulder. Yeah, he's pretty intense, huh? You'd think he'd go easy on us, but nope. Easy? He acts like he's training us to take on the entire world? Uda groaned, shifting to a more comfortable position. I mean, I know he's the Marine hero and all, but does he have to be so brutal? Gramps has always been like that, Luffy said, leaning back against the wall, his body protesting the movement. He thinks the only way to show his love is to beat the crap out of us. I get that, but still. Uda sighed, her frustration slowly giving way to exhaustion. There's a difference between tough love and whatever that was today. He nearly broke my ribs. Yeah, but we survived, didn't we? And we're stronger for it. Luffy smiled sympathetically. Besides, I think he's proud of us, in his own way. Yeah, whatever. I'm going to take a shower. See you in a bit, Uda said, getting up slowly and limping slightly as she left Luffy's room. Luffy leaned back with a sigh, closing his eyes for a moment, trying to let the lingering aches and pains fade away. Just as he was beginning to relax, there was a gentle knock on the door. He opened his eyes to see Rouge entering the room, a concerned look on her face and a notebook in her hand. Looks like Garp went overboard with his love again, Rouge said with a soft smile as she sat down beside him. She placed the notebook on the table and gently took the medical box from Luffy's hands, beginning to patch him up with practiced ease. Yeah, it's business as usual, Luffy replied, wincing slightly as Rouge applied medicine to one of his more painful wounds. By the way, what's that? Luffy asked, gesturing towards the notebook. Don't know, Rouge shrugged. Garp left it with me before he left and told me to give it to you. Oh, Luffy said, wondering what might be in that notebook. Rouge smiled warmly as she finished tending to Luffy's wounds. They're all done, she said, her voice soft with affection. You better not get into the habit of getting injured like this out at sea. After all, I won't be there to patch you up. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind, Luffy replied with a chuckle. He paused, then added almost reflexively, thanks, Mom. The word slipped out before he could catch himself, and he immediately froze, his eyes widening in surprise at what he had just said. Rouge, I'm sorry, I didn't mean. It's okay, Luffy, Rouge interrupted gently, placing a comforting hand on his head. Her voice was kind and filled with warmth. In fact, I'm quite happy you see me like that. She leaned down and kissed his forehead tenderly, but her smile faltered when she noticed tears streaming down his face. No, it's nothing, Luffy quickly shook his head, trying to brush off the question. He knew there was no way he could tell her that the tears weren't from Luffy but from Gray himself. Seeing Luffy like this, Rouge sighed softly and pulled him into a gentle embrace. stroking his head as he rested it on her shoulder. The boy leaned into her touch, finding solace in her presence. As she held him, Rouge's eyes burned with a quiet fury, directed at the kind of mother who would abandon her child without ever meeting him. The thought of Luffy growing up without his mother filled her with anger and sadness, emotions she rarely let surface. Meanwhile, Baltago, Grand Line on an island covered in white soil, within the Revolutionary Army's headquarters, a woman with golden hair and blue eyes was diligently working when a sudden wave of longing surged through her. She stood up from her desk, leaving her papers behind, and walked to the balcony facing east. "Luffy," the woman muttered in a voice thick with pain. Her expression was one of deep sorrow, the years of separation weighing heavily on her heart. But she quickly shook her head, pushing the emotions back down as she had done so many times before. "I'll have to ask Kuma to pay him another visit," she murmured to herself, before turning away from the balcony and returning to her work. Back at the Fuchsia village after sharing a heartfelt moment, Rouge gave Luffy one last smile before quietly exiting the room, leaving him alone with his thoughts. She understood he would need some time to process everything and made sure to tell Uda not to disturb him until the next morning. In the quiet of his room, Luffy finally calmed down and picked up the notebook that Rouge had brought with her. He opened it, and tucked between the pages was a letter. Curious, he unfolded it and began to read. "Hey brat, all this time I thought you were just a stupid boy trying to become a pirate to imitate that red-haired moron. I'm going to punch that idiot for badly influencing my grandson. But today I realized you're more mature than I thought. You know the path you're taking and what its consequences will be. That's why I won't force you to become a Marine anymore, and this notebook is the last thing you'll ever learn from me. If you can figure out how to master the things in this book, your strength will be greatly enhanced. If you can't, don't even think about setting foot in the Grand Line, let alone the New World. After this, there will be no more lessons or spars. The next time we face each other, it'll be as a pirate and a Marine. And I don't plan on losing to a brat like you. So train hard and don't embarrass me in front of the world. P.S. Don't cause too much trouble like your father. Sengoku is already on 3 heart medications and blames me for his condition. Your loving grandpa." Shaking his head with an amused smile, Luffy carefully folded the letter and placed it under his bed. Then he turned his attention to the notebook and opened it, his eyes widening in surprise and joy when he saw the title. Basics of Armament and Observation Haki. His heart raced with excitement. This was something that Canon Luffy hadn't acquired until 500 chapters later, and the best part was that he hadn't even needed to use his system to get it. Without wasting any time, Luffy quickly stuffed the notebook into his inventory and asked Raphael to start analyzing it. He wanted to make sure it would be easy to understand, not just for himself but for Uta and any future crew members. Just as he managed to contain his excitement, another message from Raphael popped up. "Notice. The synchronization of the randomizer system is complete." "Oh, it's finally done," Luffy said eagerly. "So, is there anything I should know?" he asked, anticipation bubbling up inside him. "Notice. The first draw comes with a 50% increase in the luck factor. Aside from that, there is nothing to worry about." "Great, let's do it," Luffy said, opening his system screen. With a mixture of excitement and nerves, he spent his first 1,000 points on a roll. Spinning. Luffy held his breath as the system processed his request. "Congratulations. Petrosapiens ability pack received. To be continued. A year of hell and a hell of a year. Raphael. System. Congratulations, Petrosapien ability pack received." Luffy stared at the system window in front of him, completely taken aback. "Huh? What the hell is Petrosapien?" he muttered, raising an eyebrow in confusion. "Notice. Master might recognize this species as Diamond Head from the television series Ben 10. Luffy's eyes widened in shock. "What, are you kidding me? You're telling me I got abilities from Diamond Head in my first draw?" he exclaimed, still staring at the screen in disbelief. Suggestion. Master should try clicking on the newly acquired ability through your stat page. Following Raphael's instructions, Luffy opened his stat page and clicked on Petrosapien under the Powers Abilities section. Petrosapien. Petrosapiens are a silicon-based life form hailing from the planet Petropia. Composed of pale green silicon crystals, They possess the remarkable ability to manipulate and generate these crystals both on and from their bodies. With the Petrosapien ability pack, the user can create, manipulate, and control crystals, allowing them to form weapons, shields, and structures. The user also has the option to undergo partial or full body transformation into a Petrosapien. However, a full body transformation rapidly eats away at the body's resilience over time. The generated crystals or crystalline creations and structures will disappear if the user moves more than 1 kilometer away from them. Mastery 0% Crystal Generation Crystal Kinesis, locked, mastery required 25%. Crystal Make, locked, mastery required 50%, partial body transformation, locked, mastery required 75%. Full body transformation, locked, mastery required 100%. Luffy stared at the details on the screen, feeling a mix of excitement and awe. So I've got the potential to use all of Diamond Head's powers, but I have to unlock them through mastery, he muttered, his mind already buzzing with possibilities. However, he couldn't help but feel a bit disappointed that he couldn't just create a giant hand out of the ground right off the bat. Still, this is awesome. Luffy's grin widened as motivation surged through him. It's like having a pseudo-logia of my own without the drawback of not being able to swim. By the way, how do I increase my mastery though? Luffy asked, eager to start progressing. Answer. Using Petrosapien's abilities will increase mastery points. Additionally, using this ability during combat or high-pressure situations will result in the acquisition of more mastery points. So the more I use it, especially in tough situations, the faster I'll get stronger with it. That's good to know, Luffy nodded, processing Raphael's explanation. Notice. The task master gave me a while ago is complete. I have found a suitable technique that would complement one of your boons and significantly increase your strength. Luffy's interest was piqued. Oh, now that's interesting, he muttered, eagerly listening as Raphael explained the technique. The next morning, Uta walked into the living room, noticing that Rouge was busy in the kitchen while Luffy was nowhere in sight. Where's Luffy? Is he still sleeping? Uta asked as she took a seat at the dining table. Actually, he woke up quite early today and went to the village, Rouge replied, glancing over her shoulder. Apparently, he had some business there. Huh? What business does he have in the village this early in the morning? Uta raised an eyebrow, puzzled. Just then, as if on cue, Luffy walked back into the house, whistling cheerfully. Hey, Uta, you're up. Good, I wanted to show you something, he said, grinning at her. He then walked toward the kitchen and turned off the stove, catching Rouge by surprise. Rouge, I want you to see this too, Luffy said, gently nudging her out of the kitchen and towards the door, while Uta followed behind, rolling her eyes at Luffy's sudden burst of enthusiasm. Once outside, Rouge and Uta stood on one side of the open yard while Luffy positioned himself a little further away, stretching and preparing for his demonstration. Uta, do you know what he's up to? Rouge asked, her curiosity piqued as she watched Luffy limber up. Honestly, I'm as clueless as you are, Uta shrugged. But if it's something stupid, I swear I'll kill him for interrupting breakfast. Luffy, having finished his stretches, took a deep breath and cracked his knuckles. Then, with a confident swing of his arm, he waved forward. Suddenly, a row of spiky green crystals erupted from the ground, spreading out before them. So, what do you think? Luffy asked, grinning widely at the two women, who stood staring in wide-eyed shock, their mouths agape. A moment later, Uta and Rouge snapped out of their daze and rushed towards him, bombarding him with questions. Luffy, what was that? How did you do that? Did you eat a devil fruit? Where did you get the money to buy a devil fruit? Why didn't you tell me about it? Okay, ladies, calm down, Luffy said, stepping back to create some distance between them. I'll answer your questions one by one. Yes, that was because of a devil fruit. No, I didn't buy it. I found it in the forest a few days ago. I didn't tell anyone because until yesterday, I didn't know what it did. So, it was because of that devil fruit that you created those crystals? Uta asked, her eyes narrowing with curiosity. What kind of devil fruit did you eat, anyway? Rouge added. Is it a Paramecia or Logia? It should be the Kesho no Mi or something similar, right? Yes, it's my devil fruit that gave me this power to create those crystals, but it's not the Kesho no Mi. Luffy explained, shaking his head. If I had to name my devil fruit, I'd call it the Randamu no Mi. Randamu no Mi. Uda and Rouge tilted their heads, clearly confused. Yeah, the Randamu no Mi. Luffy confirmed. My fruit gives me random gifts after I fulfill some mysterious conditions. He continued, last night, after our spar with Gramps, I received information in my head telling me I'd gotten 2 gifts from my fruit. The first is the ability to manipulate these crystals, and the second is this, he said, and with a flick of his hand, a ripple appeared in the air. Luffy reached into the ripple and pulled out the notebook that Garp had left for him. It's a subspace where I can store any non-living thing. Cool, right? Last night, Luffy had spent quite a lot of time thinking about how he was going to explain his newfound powers to Rouge and Uda. He realized that as he gained more abilities and items from the system, he would eventually need to come up with a plausible explanation, especially for Uda, who would be traveling with him as a part of his future crew. In the end, he decided to attribute everything to a fictional devil fruit he named the Randamu no Mi. A fruit that grants random abilities and items after meeting certain unknown conditions. He knew his explanation sounded a bit stupid and even unbelievable to an extent, but it was the best Luffy could come up with without delving into the complicated truth about the system and going into the rabbit hole of his whole existence. Uda and Rouge exchanged looks, still processing the information. That's certainly something, Uda said, still trying to wrap her head around it. So, you just randomly get powers from this fruit? Exactly. Luffy nodded enthusiastically. Not just powers but items as well. I have no idea what I'll get next, but that's part of the fun, right? Rouge, still processing everything, shook her head in disbelief. I'll be honest, Luffy. I've heard about many devil fruits in my time, some giving the most bizarre powers, but your devil fruit surpasses them all by miles, she said with an astonished expression. But still, knowing that you have a strong devil fruit will give me a little peace when you two are out on the sea. Thanks, Luffy said, beaming at her with his signature sunshine-like smile. Anyway, since I'm done with my demonstration, let's go after that. I have some important things to discuss with Uda. After breakfast, Luffy led Uda outside the house, back to their usual training spot. They walked in comfortable silence, Uda skipping lightly and humming to herself while Luffy idly sent out rows of crystals around him, gradually working to increase his mastery over his new abilities. Once they reached their usual spot, Luffy turned to Uda, his expression more focused and serious than usual. Uda, there's something important I want to talk to you about. Uda raised an eyebrow, noticing the shift in his tone. What's up? You're being unusually serious. Recently, I've been thinking a lot about our future, Luffy began, his gaze steady. As you know, we plan to set sail next year, and I think it's time to take our training to the next level. Uda crossed her arms, intrigued but slightly wary. What do you mean by next level? Do you know what Haki is? Luffy asked. Yeah, Shanks told me about it. He said it's a power that can be used to hurt logia users, Uda replied. Luffy considered explaining how Haki could be much more than an anti-logia tool, but he knew that Uda would find it strange for him to have such detailed knowledge about something so advanced, especially considering, in her eyes, Luffy had spent his entire life on this small island in the East Blue. In that case, I don't need to tell you how important Haki is, Luffy said, tossing her the notebook that Garp had left behind. Starting tomorrow, we're going to get up early and begin intense training. I want both of us to awaken Haki before we set sail next year. I get what you're saying, but why do we have to get up early? Uda groaned, flipping through the notebook in her hand. A girl needs her beauty sleep, you know? A teasing grin appeared on his face as Luffy couldn't help but tease her. Why do you need beauty sleep? I thought that only applied to beautiful girls, he snickered, quickly dodging a rock that Uda threw at him in annoyance. Ha ha, very funny, Uda muttered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Anyway, jokes aside, what else are you planning? Along with Haki training, I also want us to focus on this, Luffy said, tossing her another notebook. Uda caught the notebook and read the title aloud, Guide to Use, Total Concentration Breathing and Total Concentration Constant. What is this? It's a breathing technique that can enhance your physical abilities by focusing on controlling your breath. It's a powerful method that will help us improve our strength, speed, and endurance, Luffy explained. Basically, it involves expanding your lungs to take in as much air as possible. which accelerates your blood flow and heartbeat. This increases your inner body temperature, causing your bones and muscles to become more excited and responsive. So, it's like a way to supercharge our bodies just by breathing properly, Uda said, flipping through the pages with growing interest. But seriously, where the hell did you get this? Luffy blanked for a moment, realizing he hadn't thought of an explanation. My devil fruit gave it to me. Yeah, my quirk gave it to me, he quickly said, trying to sound convincing. Uda raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. Really? I thought you only received 2 gifts from your devil fruit, that being the crystal power and that storage space. You never mentioned this, she said, holding up the second notebook. Oh, I must have forgotten about that, Luffy replied with a sheepish smile, rubbing the back of his head. Anyway, as I was saying, we need to master these 2 techniques before we set sail next year. Although I'm a bit skeptical about mastering total concentration constant, we should at least try. In truth, Luffy had his doubts about whether they could fully master even the normal total concentration breathing. He wasn't sure if their bodies could adapt to a technique from a completely different series. However, he held on to hope since Raphael had recommended it, and he trusted her judgment. Notice. There is no need to doubt me, Master. Wait a minute. Was that just a hint of smugness in your voice? Luffy asked. Notice. That is just your imagination. Of course. Luffy shook his head, realizing there was no point in arguing with her. Luffy then turned to Uda with a devilish grin that made her gulp nervously. Well, Uda, enjoy your last day of peace, he said ominously. Because starting tomorrow, you're going to experience a year of hell. 5 months later, finally, I did it, Luffy. I did it, Uda exclaimed, her voice filled with triumph as she jumped on Luffy, pulling him into a tight hug. I finally awakened both armament and observation haki. That you did? Congratulations, Luffy replied, returning the hug with a grin. He was genuinely proud of her. It had taken Uda longer than he'd anticipated to awaken both types of haki, but she had finally done it. Given that she didn't have the benefit of Raphael's guidance to correct her mistakes, in his opinion, her achievement was even more impressive. As for Luffy, he had awakened both types of haki 2 months earlier with Raphael's help. Raphael was often harsh and condescending during training, but there was no use in complaining to her since she would just reply with, "That was just your imagination." In the end, he stopped complaining since her corrections were always spot on, making Luffy's progress faster and more efficient. Despite her attitude, there was no denying that her methods worked. However, despite awakening both armament and observation haki, he didn't receive any kind of achievement from his system, as he had expected, making him believe that there wasn't any achievement for mastering haki. But then Raphael told him that there was a chance that he didn't receive any achievement because he hasn't mastered the basic haki yet. Sensing Luffy's confusion, Raphael further explained that even in basic haki mastery there is more than just awakening haki. For armament haki there are 2 different techniques he needs to master armament haki. However, to Luffy's surprise, he hadn't received any achievement or reward from his system after awakening both types of haki. He initially thought that perhaps the system didn't reward haki mastery, but Raphael had informed him that the lack of an achievement might be because he hadn't fully mastered the basics yet. Sensing Luffy's confusion, Raphael explained that basic haki mastery involved more than just awakening it. For armament haki, there were 2 techniques he needed to master. Hardening, the most basic application of armament haki, where the user coats their desired body part with a black layer of haki. This was something Luffy could already do as soon as he awakened his haki. Imbuement, this technique allows the user to imbue their armament haki into objects they touch, effectively giving their weapons the same boost as their own body. For observation haki, mastery required proficiency in 4 different types of sensing. Presence sensing, the most common usage of this haki, allows the user to sense the presence of others. Strength sensing, this application of haki allows the user to measure the strength of the people whose presence they this application. The user can easily locate powerful allies and avoid powerful enemies. Emotion sensing, this variation of observation haki allows the user to sense and empathize with the emotions and nature of others. However, people with high control over their emotions and acting abilities can somewhat counter this technique. Intent sensing, the variant of observation haki, allows its user to sense the bloodlust, killing intent of the enemy, which is highly helpful in battle, as the user, depending on their level of proficiency, may have a vastly easier time predicting the path of the enemy attacks to either dodge or counter them. The more killing intent exuded by a given enemy, the more predictable their attacks. Each type of sensing had its specific application, and Luffy had to master all 4 to fully master observation Haki. When he told Uda about quickly deflated, and she slumped to the ground, groaning in frustration. "Why, Luffy? Why did you have to ruin my fun like that?" she grumbled, shooting him a side eye. Luffy couldn't help but chuckle at her reaction. "Don't be like that," he said, shaking his head with an amused smile. "Now that you've awakened both types of Haki, it'll be easier for you to master them." Yeah, I get it," Uda pouted, folding her arms across her chest. "But stop cheering me up like I'm a baby or something. If you don't want to be treated like a baby, then stop acting like one," Luffy teased, ruffling her hair much to her annoyance. "How about this? If you show the same dedication to mastering both types of Haki that you showed in awakening them, I'll give you something nice when my devil fruit gifts me something suitable for you. You promise?" Uda's mood immediately did a 180 as she jumped to her feet, her eyes sparkling with determination. Once Luffy nodded, she was practically bouncing with newfound energy. "In that case, I'm going to master the heck out of this Haki." "Good," Luffy said, nodding approvingly. "Now go back and take some rest. I still have a few more hours of training to do, focusing on total concentration constant." "Of course, go and practice your stupid breathing technique," Uda grumbled, stomping her foot in mock annoyance. Luffy knew exactly why she was salty. Despite pushing herself for 3 grueling months, Uda hadn't been able to grasp total concentration breathing. In the end, she gave up, frustrated with the feeling that her lungs were going to burst out of her chest. Luffy, however, continued to push through the pain. He had seen the wonders this technique had done for Tanjiro in Demon Slayer, and after 6 months of relentless training, he finally managed to use total concentration breathing on command. That day, he nearly cried with joy, only to realize that he hadn't received any achievement from the system. He quickly concluded that he needed to master the more advanced total concentration constant technique to earn any rewards. The total concentration constant required him to maintain the breathing technique at all times, morning, noon, and night. To achieve this, Luffy asked Raphael to send random jolts of pain to his body whenever he stopped using the breath, replicating the same method Tanjiro used in the series. "Fine, I'm going," Uda said, waving him off. "Besides, I have my own preparations to make for our journey." "Oh, what kind of preparations?" Luffy asked, curious. "That's a surprise," Uda said with a wink, before turning and walking away. "Fine, I'll wait, I guess," Luffy shrugged and returned to his training. And so, life continued as Luffy and Uda pushed forward with their preparations. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The year was passing by quickly, filled with intense training and the occasional surprise. But there was one encounter during the 9th month of their training that shook Luffy to his core, making him question once again what kind of timeline he had found himself in. 3 months before setting sail. Petrosapien Mastery 20%. Luffy stared at the screen, a satisfied smile playing on his lips as he saw the progress in his abilities. His Petrosapien Mastery had reached 20%, and he had a strong feeling that he would unlock the second aspect of his power before setting sail in a few months. On top of that, he felt close to breaking through and mastering the total concentration constant as well. Then just as he was lost in thought, marveling at his stat page, Luffy's observation Haki picked up on a presence hiding behind a nearby tree. "I wonder if it's who I think it is," Luffy thought to himself, and without hesitation, he sent a row of spiked crystals shooting toward the hidden figure at rapid speed. The crystals destroyed the tree the moment they made contact, however they shattered as they met the palm of the person behind the tree, and their momentum stopped cold. "You've got quite a handy ability there," Luffy said, his gaze settling on the pads on the man's hands. Then again, the Niku no Mi is much more terrifying than people give it credit for, isn't that right, Bartholomew Kuma? "You know who I am," Kuma responded, his eyes fixed on the straw hat wearing boy. "Once I realized who my father was, I did some digging of my own. Learned about him, his work, and his friends," Luffy explained as he walked toward the towering figure. "How did you learn about me, though?" Kuma asked, his voice steady. "Is there a leak among our ranks?" Don't worry about my source. They're not a threat to you or your cause in any way, Luffy assured him with a smile. By the way, what are you doing here? Did my dad send you to check up on me? It was your mother, actually, Kuma replied. Luffy paused, the words slowly sinking in. Ah, so it was my mom. He trailed off, his mind catching up with what Kuma had just said. Wait a minute, I have a mom. Of course. Everyone has a mother, Kuma replied with a hint of amusement. It takes two people to create a child. Perhaps someone needs to give you the birds and bees talk. Stop, I know what SX is, alright. Luffy quickly interjected, embarrassed. I'm just surprised since no one ever mentioned her before. I thought she left Dad because he's, well, a deadbeat. No, she didn't leave your father. In fact, she works with him as his deputy head. And please don't call Dragon that, Kuma said, taking out a piece of paper and handing it to Luffy. Here, this is her picture. Luffy unfolded the paper and stared at the image. Wanted, image of a woman with golden hair and blue eyes, staring at the camera with cold eyes. Dead or alive Charlotte Estelle 2 billion belly. Oh, she's beautiful, Luffy muttered, staring at the picture of his mother, wondering why he didn't inherit any of her striking features. But as his gaze shifted from her image to the name below, he froze. His thoughts spiraled, his eyes becoming distant as realization dawned on him. Charlotte. No, it can't be. He stammered, the words catching in his throat as a chilling realization washed over him. Charlotte Linlin, aka Big Mom of the Four Emperors, is my grandmother. To be continued. A wild queen appeared, Raphael. System. No. There must be some kind of misunderstanding here. Luffy muttered in disbelief, his eyes wide as he looked up at Kuma. Hey, are you sure you're not mistaken? Is this woman really my mother? No, there is no mistake, Kuma replied with his usual calm demeanor. Charlotte Estelle, the eldest daughter of Charlotte Linlin, is your mother. Luffy's grip tightened around the bounty poster as his eyes fixed on the staggering 2 billion berry bounty. The amount alone was shocking, but what truly terrified him was the face staring back at him from the poster. It wasn't just the face of his mother, no, it was the monstrous silhouette he could imagine standing behind her, accompanied by the fact that his grandmother was none other than Big Mom, one of the Four Emperors. Fuck, Luffy cursed under his breath, struggling to process the information. Does anyone else know about her being my mother? He asked, his voice taut with anxiety. No, Kuma reassured him in a calm voice. There are only 4 people in this world who know about the relationship between you and Estelle. Your father, Dragon. Your mother, Estelle. Your grandfather, Garp. And now me. We are the only ones who currently know about your connection to Estelle. A wave of relief washed over Luffy as he exhaled the breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Good, he muttered, more to himself than to Kuma. Please, keep it that way. If that old hag finds out that I'm her grandson, she'll drag me to Toto Land and make me serve her. Kuma nodded gravely. That is indeed true. Charlotte Linlin is known for her short temper and her obsession with gathering her family around her. If she discovered your identity, it would be nearly impossible to escape her grasp. Yeah. I have no intention of serving under her, Luffy said, shaking his head resolutely. So, is there anything else? No, Kuma replied, his tone signaling the end of their conversation. And I should be going now. I wasn't supposed to interact with you in the first place. He hesitated, then added, is there any message you want to pass on to your parents? Well, what kind of message can I even pass on to people I barely know? Hell, I wouldn't even know what they look like if it wasn't for these bounty posters, Luffy said with a bitter smile. While original Luffy never cared much about his lineage, the revelation of his parents stirred something deeper within him. Gray, the one now inhabiting Luffy's body, found the subject more personal, given that he had been abandoned at birth and raised in an orphanage. This connection, or lack thereof, hit harder than it ever would have for the original Luffy. Anyway, just tell them that despite my personal grievances, they are doing good work, and if I ever become some kind of big shot on the sea, they can count on my help, Luffy added, trying to keep his tone light, though the underlying bitterness was hard to miss. Very well, I will keep that in mind, Kuma said with a small smile on his face. Kuma, I mean it, you know, Luffy said, more forcefully this time. If you ever need help, you can count on me. Kuma stared intently at Luffy for a moment before nodding and then vanishing from the island. Well, that was something. Luffy murmured as he stared at the spot where Kuma had just been standing. If he was honest with himself, he would never have imagined anyone was keeping an eye on him if it hadn't been revealed in the manga a few chapters ago. That's why Luffy had often flared his observation haki when he was on his own, to see if Kuma would really appear. Today, his gamble had paid off. This timeline just keeps getting more confusing with the existence of Charlotte Estelle, Luffy muttered, staring at the bounty poster in his hand. Canon Luffy's mother was never mentioned until now, so I don't know what role you'll play in my life. I just hope you don't bring me more trouble than I'm already expecting by being in the protagonist's body. He paused, realizing how futile that hope was. No, forget about that. Knowing Luffy's luck, trouble is always just a couple of blocks away, he said, shaking his head. The only thing I can do right now is to get stronger and be prepared for whatever's waiting ahead. With that resolve, Luffy returned to his training, pushing himself harder than ever. He knew that now he had an even bigger target on his back, with Estelle being a member of his family, and he would need every ounce of strength and skill to navigate the storms laid ahead. The 3 months that followed Luffy's encounter with Kuma passed without any significant incidents, allowing Luffy and Uda to focus intensely on their training. Both had made substantial progress, finally mastering the basic forms of armament and observation haki. Uda, overjoyed by her accomplishment, couldn't contain her excitement and constantly pestered Luffy about the gift he had promised her as a reward for her hard work. Meanwhile, Luffy received the long-anticipated achievements from his system after mastering both types of haki, just as he had predicted when he first awakened them. Armament Haki Mastery. The achievement is given to an individual who mastered the basics of armament haki. Reward: 200 points. Observation Haki Mastery. The achievement is given to an individual who mastered the basics of observation haki. Reward: 200 points. But those weren't the only achievements he received. After months of grueling training, Luffy had finally mastered the total concentration constant, a feat that required him to wake up constantly at night due to the severe pain Raphael would send through his body whenever she detected him not using the breathing technique. This hard-earned accomplishment earned him another achievement from the system. Breath Master. The achievement is given to an individual who mastered the total concentration breathing and total concentration constant. Reward: 200 points. Only 600 points for a year's worth of effort? That doesn't seem fair, Luffy muttered, frowning as he stared at the system screen. The rewards felt underwhelming, considering the sheer amount of time and energy he had poured into mastering these techniques. But after a moment of reflection, he shrugged. Forget about it. I got more out of mastering these skills than the achievements I received from them, he thought, pushing aside the disappointment, considering these rewards from the system just a bonus for his efforts. What made it easier for Luffy to shrug off his disappointment was his progress in Petrosapien Mastery, which had now reached 27%, allowing him to unlock his crystal kinesis ability from the Petrosapien pack. What softened the blow was his progress in Petrosapien Mastery, which had now reached 27%, unlocking his crystal kinesis ability from the Petrosapien pack. With crystal kinesis unlocked, Luffy no longer needed to rely solely on sending rows of spiked crystals at his enemies. He could now freely manipulate the crystals he generated, opening up a wide range of strategies and possibilities in combat. This new level of control made him feel more confident in his growth and potential. Overall, Luffy was pleased with the progress he had made over the year. Knowing the potential for rapid growth that the original Luffy had shown in the manga gave him hope that this was just the beginning. Curious to see how many points he had accumulated, Luffy opened his stat screen. Name: Monkey D. Luffy, Gray, age, 20 boons. Lord of Wisdom. Raphael Inventory Perfect Healthy Body. Powers, Abilities. Petrosapien, Mastery 27% System. Randomizer. Points: 4,523 titles. The Boy Who Inherited Will. The Charismatic Prince. Oh, 4,523 points. That means I can do 4 roles, Luffy said, satisfied with his accumulated points. Throughout the last year, Luffy had exercised remarkable self-control, resisting the temptation to do a single role despite having the required number of points. He had two major reasons behind his decision to save up the points. Untaisen was strategic. Luffy knew that mastering his existing abilities would take time. Mastering Haki was a long and grueling process, and mastering his Petrosapien abilities was always going to be a long game. Adding total concentration constant into the mix made his schedule even tighter, so he didn't see the point in overwhelming himself with more abilities in case he got any new ones from the rolls, before fully mastering the ones he already had. The second reason was based on his experience with gacha-type games. Luffy had hoped that saving a large number of points and doing multiple pulls at once might increase his odds of getting better abilities or items, similar to how some games offered bonuses for bulk pulls. However, this hope was quickly dashed when Raphael informed him that his system didn't operate that way. The randomizer system was strictly limited to one pull at a time, with no added advantage for doing multiple pulls simultaneously. It was a sobering reminder that his system followed its own rules, not those of a game. Despite the second reason falling through, the first reason still held, so he continued to let his points accumulate while focusing on mastering his current abilities. But now, with his training at a satisfactory level, Luffy decided it was finally time to use his points and test his luck with the randomizer system. A week before Uta and Luffy were set to sail, Luffy found himself sitting alone in his room, once again staring at his stat page. It had become a routine for him to check his stats whenever he had some time to himself. But today, there was a palpable excitement in the air. After months of patience, he was finally going to use his accumulated points to perform some gacha rolls from his gifted system. "Hey, Raphael, can you predict what I could get from the gacha this time?" Luffy asked, curious if his sentient supercomputer companion could offer any insights. "Negative. Master, the potential rewards you could obtain from the randomizer system come from an infinite pool of prizes, so it is impossible to predict the outcome." Well, it was worth a shot. Luffy shrugged, not too surprised by the answer. He knew Raphael's limitations and wasn't expecting a concrete prediction. "Anyway, since I have enough points for 4 rolls, I hope I can get something good." "Well, here goes nothing," Luffy said and spent his first 1,000 points and initiated his first roll. "Congratulations. 4 decks of Uno cards received." "Uno cards?" Luffy said as he retrieved one of the 4 decks from his inventory. "I guess this system really can give anything," he muttered, feeling slightly disappointed. The cards were fun but ultimately useless when it truly mattered. "I guess they could be used to pass time during our travels." He returned the deck of cards to his inventory and moved on to the second roll. "Congratulations. Enchanted Jet character equipment set received." "Wow, this looks like something good," Luffy smirked as he retrieved the set from his inventory. It was a full set of Jet's attire, including a black tank top, a short blue hooded sleeveless jacket, black pants, shoes, long socks, gloves, and a belt holding 5 of her signature knives. "This is honestly really cool," Luffy said, admiring the set before returning it to his inventory and checking the enchantments. There are only 2 enchantments: self-repair, which allows the clothes to repair themselves over time, and self-fitting, which allows the clothes to change their size based on the user. Not bad. Not bad at all. Encouraged by the second roll, Luffy moved on to the third. "Congratulations. A copy of the Daily Prophet, the 19th of June 1996 received." "This is so cool," Luffy exclaimed upon seeing the iconic newspaper from the Harry Potter universe. "Oh, this edition is from right after the Battle of the Department of Mysteries." He admired the newspaper for a few minutes before returning it to his inventory, already imagining how one day he would have a huge house where he could showcase all these valuable collectibles. Finally, Luffy spent his last 1,000 points and initiated the 4th roll. "Congratulations. 10,000 berries received. And there goes my last draw," Luffy sighed, feeling a bit let down. "I really set my hopes high after receiving the Petrosapien ability pack in my first draw. Well, at least Jet's equipment set was quite a decent reward." Just then, he heard Uta shouting from outside. "Luffy, come to the living room, I have to show you something." "Well, I better go see what got her so excited before she bursts into my room without knocking." Like usual, Luffy chuckled to himself as he got up and made his way to the living room. "So, Uta, what happened? Why are you shouting like the house is on fire?" Luffy asked as he entered the living room, joining Rouge, who was already there, watching Yuta with a mix of curiosity and amusement. Luffy, remember a few months ago when I told you I was preparing something for our journey? Well, my preparations are finally complete. Uda grinned, her excitement practically radiating off her. Wait here, I'll be back in a moment, she said, skipping off to her room. A few moments later, Uda returned, and Luffy and Rouge stared at her with wide eyes. Uda, where the hell did you get that? Rouge asked, pointing at the 2 revolvers and a marksman rifle that Uda had brought along with her. I ordered them a year ago with the money I had saved, Uda said proudly, showing off the guns. Not just the guns, but ammo as well. I ordered in bulk, so it took some time to arrive. Uda, I didn't know you wanted to be a marksman, Luffy said, raising an eyebrow in curiosity. This was the first time he'd heard about it. I never had a chance to tell you, Uda shrugged. It's not like we had guns available, so the topic never came up. But I've always loved guns. Back when I was on Shanks' ship, I was often scolded for messing with Ben's or Usopp's guns. So, I decided that when we set sail, I'll be the marksman of the crew. Well, that's good and all, but do you have the aim to back your claim? Luffy challenged with a playful smirk. Uda met his gaze with equal confidence. Instead of answering, she slung the rifle over her back, picked up the 2 revolvers, and walked outside, gesturing for him to follow. Luffy and Rouge followed her, and once again, they were surprised to see tin cans set up as targets all over their backyard at various distances. I knew you'd question my greatness, so I prepared this in the morning, Uda said, rubbing under her nose with a smug grin. Where the hell did you get all these tin cans? Did you collect garbage around the village or something? Luffy asked, glancing at the various targets Uda had set up. Haha, brother, you're really funny. Why don't you become our crew's jester? Uda sarcastically retorted. Anyway, Captain, are you ready to see the beginning of the best markswoman in the world? Very well, Uda. Show me what you've got, Luffy said, his tone both encouraging and teasing. With a confident grin, Uda spun the 2 revolvers in her hands, then pointed them toward the targets. She took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing as she focused, and in a quick succession of shots, she fired at the tin cans. Each shot Uda fired was precise, hitting the targets dead on. The cans were either knocked over or pierced straight through, leaving no doubt about her skills. Uda continued firing, smoothly transitioning from one target to the next with impressive speed and accuracy. She downed 12 targets at medium range with her revolvers before quickly switching to her rifle and expertly taking out another 6 targets at long range. When she finally stopped, all the targets were down, the backyard now filled with the echo of her shots. Luffy stood there, genuinely shocked by Uda's performance. He couldn't believe how he had never noticed her spectacular aim before. As if answering his unspoken question, Raphael flooded his mind with various memories where Uda had demonstrated her talent, but he had overlooked them. Or him. Like when Uda would casually throw trash into the dustbin from various distances or when she would perfectly hit him during snowball fights. It was clear now that her skills had always been there, he had just never paid close enough attention. Realizing that her show was over, Luffy's expression softened into a genuine smile of admiration. Well, color me impressed, Uda. You weren't kidding when you said you wanted to be the best markswoman, he praised, still in awe. Rouge, who had been watching silently, nodded in approval, her face lighting up with a kind smile. You've got real talent, Uda, she said warmly. With more practice, you could definitely become the best markswoman in the world. Thanks, Uda beamed, clearly pleased with the praise. I've been practicing in secret for a while now, but I'm glad I finally got to show off a little. Luffy chuckled, imagining Shanks' reaction. I can't wait to see Shanks' reaction when he realizes that his daughter idolizes his first mate and sniper of the crew. He walked over to her and retrieved the enchanted jet character equipment set from his inventory. Here, I told you I'd give you something nice when my devil fruit gifted me something suitable for you. Well, here it is. Why don't you go try it on? Uda's eyes widened in surprise and excitement as she took in the sleek outfit. Oh my god, thank you, she exclaimed, jumping on Luffy and hugging him tightly. Without wasting a moment, she quickly took the set from his hands and ran inside the house, eager to try it on. Luffy watched Uda go with a satisfied grin on his face, still marveling at the coincidence. The same day he received the equipment from Jet, a character known for being a go-to choice for snipers in her game. His sister and first mate revealed herself as a markswoman. It was as if fate had aligned, ensuring that the gear wouldn't just collect dust in his inventory. Instead, it found the perfect user in Uda. Rouge, who had been observing quietly, placed a hand on Luffy's shoulder. "You two have grown so much," she said softly. "I'm proud of both of you." "Thanks for your kind words, but we still have a long way to go," Luffy replied. "Right now, we can't even compare to Ace, who's become a member of the Whitebeard Pirates and their 2nd Division commander, or Gramps, who could take on multiple admirals on his own." "Ace really joined Whitebeard, didn't he?" Rouge said, a distant look in her eyes. "Who would have thought that the biological son of Roger would join Whitebeard's crew and become his son?" She chuckled, though there was a hint of sadness in her laughter. "I wonder what Roger would have thought if he were alive today." "I'm sure he would have laughed and then threatened Whitebeard to take good care of his son," Luffy said, pulling her into a side hug. "Now, stop wasting your tears. Ace is doing well for himself. And we don't want you getting dehydrated, do we now?" "Seriously, Luffy, can't you be serious for a moment?" Rouge rolled her eyes and poked Luffy in the stomach, her mood lightening. Just then, the door to the house opened, and Uda walked out, outfitted in her new attire. "Oh my god! You look so good," Rouge exclaimed, her eyes widening in admiration. "Thanks, Rouge." Uda beamed as she adjusted the belt holding the 5 knives around her waist. "Luffy, your devil fruit is really amazing if it can give these kinds of gifts." "Let me show you something even more amazing," Luffy said, walking toward her. He took out one of the knives from the belt and, to Uda's surprise, slashed her jacket, creating a tear in it. "Luffy, what the hell are you doing? Why are you?" Her words halted as she saw the tear in her jacket begin to repair itself before her eyes. "Huh? What? How?" "These clothes have 2 features, self-repair, and self-fitting, which means they'll last you for quite a few years." "Luffy, are you sure this is your devil fruit and not some kind of magic?" Rouge asked, her tone filled with wonder. "Well, it is what it is," Luffy shrugged, quickly trying to steer the conversation away from his powers. He didn't want them dwelling too much on the nature of his abilities. "How about both of you head back inside, and I make a quick trip to the village to get us some desserts?" "Great idea." Uda cheered, stars in her eyes as she eagerly grabbed Rouge's arm and started dragging her back to the house. As they headed inside, Luffy watched them go with a smile. It had just been a year since he inhabited this body, but he was damn sure that he was going to miss these interactions with his family. The night before setting sail, Luffy stood on a cliff, staring out at the vast sea. The moon hung high in the sky, its light reflected in the endless expanse of water. The scene was tranquil, but Luffy's mind was anything but. He couldn't help but think about how a year had passed since he died in his old world and found himself transmigrated into Luffy's body. If he was being honest with himself, the year he had spent here felt more fulfilling than his entire life in his previous world. His thoughts drifted to the numerous differences between this world and the One Piece world he knew from the manga. There were significant changes, Rouge being alive, Uda staying in Fuchsia village, his mother being a Charlotte, and undoubtedly many more alterations he wasn't even aware of. Just as he was lost in thought, he suddenly felt a presence behind him. His senses, sharpened by his training in Haki, alerted him to someone nearby. He turned around, wondering who might be awake at this late hour, only for his eyes to widen in shock. Standing before him was someone he never expected to see, let alone in Fuchsia village. I believe this is our first meeting, so why do your eyes scream that you already know me, Luffy-chan?" The figure's voice was seductive and feminine, sending shivers down Luffy's spine and filling him with a terror he hadn't felt in either his past or current life. And how could he not be terrified? After all, standing before him was none other than the supreme ruler of the world government, Emu. To be continued. The sovereign encounter, Raphael. System. Is that fear I'm sensing from you? Luffy's entire body trembled as Emu chuckled with a hint of amusement while her voice carried a twisted delight. "How amusing, isn't it, Luffy-chan?" Meanwhile, Luffy stood frozen, his mind racing with a single thought. How could this be happening? Why the hell am I encountering the final boss in the starting zone? Suddenly, Imu's eyes narrowed, and a terrifying aura erupted from her, suffocating the air around them. The weight of her presence was overwhelming, far beyond anything Luffy had ever encountered. This was the being who ruled the world from the shadows, the true power behind the world government. In the manga, Imu had been a mysterious figure, their full capabilities and motives shrouded in secrecy. But now, in this altered world, they were standing right in front of him, and Luffy had no idea how to deal with this being. The only time he had seen Imu vulnerable in the manga was through Joy Boy's Conqueror's Haki stored in the ancient robot, something he had no hope of accessing anytime soon. Just as panic began to set in, Raphael's voice echoed in his mind. Notice. Attempt at reading Master's mind detected. Do you wish to block it? Yes. Do it. Luffy screamed internally, questioning the need for permission in the first place. Meanwhile, Imu's eyes widened slightly as she was violently thrown out of Luffy's mind. But instead of anger, a hearty laugh escaped her lips, sending more shivers down Luffy's spine. Oh, my, I've never had someone block me from reading their mind before. How amusing, she said, lowering her cloak to reveal the face of a stunning woman with long white hair, pale skin, and almond-shaped eyes with red irises, each containing a thin ring around the pupil. You should be honored. This is the first time in centuries that someone has seen my true appearance. Before Luffy could even process her words, he suddenly felt a hand around his neck, lifting him into the air. What? His mind reeled as he realized that before he could react, Imu had already moved and was holding him up by the neck. Strange. Very strange, Imu mused as she scrutinized him. You haven't eaten the damned rubber fruit like my visions told me about. In fact, ever since last year, the world has been rapidly changing to the point where my visions couldn't keep up, and now I see nothing at all, she said, digging her long nails into Luffy's neck, drawing a tiny stream of blood. I have a hunch that you're at the center of it all. In a moment of panic, Luffy grabbed the hand holding him up and used his newly unlocked crystal kinesis to encase it in green crystals. But instead of releasing him, Imu simply stared at her encased hand with an amused smile. This material doesn't belong to this world, does it? She said before effortlessly shattering the crystals with a burst of powerful haki. And your breathing. It doesn't sound or feel normal either. How exciting, she brought him closer, licking the blood that trickled from his neck. Your blood isn't normal either. It has a minor healing factor, yet you haven't consumed a devil fruit. Another strange inherited ability. How peculiar. You know, Luffy-chan, I should really kill you, Imu whispered seductively in his ear. Your potential is much stronger than my visions indicated, making you a much more potent threat to my rule. Even Nika's successors aren't as much of a threat, as there's no guarantee they'll awaken the fruit. But you will definitely become a troublesome existence. Luffy's heart pounded in his chest as he listened, every instinct screaming at him to escape, though he knew that at this moment was impossible and he was totally at this madwoman's mercy. But don't worry, I won't kill you, Luffy-chan, Imu smirked with a dangerous glint in her eyes. She released him, letting him fall to the ground. Why would I want to curb the first entertaining thing that's happened in this world in the last 800 years? Instead, I will allow you to live and grow as much as you want. In return, I ask only one thing from you. Luffy, trying to regain his breath, looked up at her, utterly confused and terrified, but knowing there was only one response to give. What do you want? He asked, glaring at her despite the overwhelming fear. That defiance in your eyes, how delicious, Imu smirked, licking her lips, sending another shiver down Luffy's spine. Nothing much. I just need a promise from you. A vow that you will continue to grow and one day challenge me for my throne. In return, I vow that no matter what you do in the future, no matter how much chaos you cause in my world, my empire, I won't lift a finger to stop you. Luffy's mind raced as he considered the overall situation. That sounds too good to be true, he thought, eyeing Imu warily, and the look in her eyes confirmed there was definitely some catch. But at the moment, he had no choice but to accept her conditions. Fine, Luffy said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. I promise that I will grow strong and one day challenge your throne in return for you not interfering or moving against me, my family, or anyone I consider family or my crewmates in any shape or form. You're smart to snub out that loophole. I like it, Imu said, leaning forward. Very well, I accept your vow, she said, and in the next moment, She captured his lips in a kiss. Luffy froze, stunned, and before he could process what was happening, he felt chains wrapping around both of them. He was confused for a moment, but then his eyes widened as he realized what was happening. Something far beyond his expectations or even his wildest imagination. When she finally released him, Imu smiled mischievously. "That was your first kiss, wasn't it? Too bad I stole it from you." "Just now. That was a binding vow, wasn't it?" Luffy asked, and for the first time in their entire encounter, he saw a look of genuine surprise flash across her face. "How the hell did you do that?" "Centuries have passed, and countless people have been tricked into making a vow with me, but this is the first time someone has recognized the trick." "How strange," Imu said, folding her arms over her chest. "And no, I'm not going to tell you how I did it. After all, a woman is SXIER with her secrets," she said, turning her back on him. "Hey, are you going around kissing people for centuries now?" Luffy shouted impulsively, immediately regretting his words, cursing himself and his big mouth. Imu stopped and looked over her shoulder, unimpressed. "No, I usually don't, but I told you, you're special, didn't I?" she said and glanced at the moon. "Besides, the only other person I made a vow this way was the Queen of Alabasta, all those centuries ago." Then she pulled up her cloak once more, shrouding her face in shadows with only her terrifying eyes visible to the world. "By the way, the binding vow only involves me, so if my servants or tools decide to act against you, you're on your own," she said, flashing a cruel smile at him. "Well then, I'll be going now. See you again, Luffy-chan, bye." And with those words, the supreme ruler of the world vanished, leaving the young, terrified boy alone on the ground. Half an hour later, Luffy returned to the house and went straight to his room, relieved that it was late enough for everyone to be asleep. He wasn't in the mood to answer any questions or engage in conversation. The encounter with Imu weighed heavily on his mind, and as he lay on his bed, the entire experience replayed in his head, and by the end of it, he couldn't help but count his lucky stars that the ruler of the world was a psychopath who was more interested in toying with him than simply killing him on the spot. Just then, the system's voice echoed in his mind. "Ding, congratulations. 2 new achievements unlocked. Congratulations. 2 new titles unlocked." "Huh? What's this about?" Luffy muttered to himself as he sat up and clicked on the achievement section to see what he had earned. So achievement is given to the individual who has encountered the supreme ruler of the world. Reward. Upgrade token X1. So, meeting that woman gave me an achievement. Well, at least something good came out of that encounter, Luffy said, feeling a small sense of relief. An upgrade token. That sounds interesting. I'll have to check that out later. He then checked the second achievement he had unlocked. Sovereign Vow. The achievement is given to the individual who has made some kind of contract with the supreme ruler of the world. Reward. Randomizer roll X2. I guess I really made a binding vow with that woman, Luffy said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. I really hope this doesn't come back to bite me in the ass in the future. But hey, 2,000 points worth of rewards? Making a vow with that woman must be a pretty big deal. Curious, Luffy opened his stats page to see the 2 new titles that had been added. The one who met the sovereign. The title is given to an individual who met the supreme ruler of the world and lived to tell the tale. Surviving an encounter with the most dangerous woman in the world is no small feat. The holder of this title has probably exhausted all their luck escaping the clutches of that mad woman. Who the hell writes these descriptions? Luffy's eye twitched as he read the title's description. What the hell does it mean by, probably, well, at least even the system acknowledges her as a madwoman. Shaking his head, Luffy clicked on the next title. The one who made the Sovereign Pact. The title is given to a fearless individual who made a binding vow with the supreme ruler of the world. Whether the vow is beneficial to the individual or not, only time will tell. What's up with these vague descriptions? Luffy's eye twitched again. Forget about it. It's not like they're doing anything other than reminding me of my situation. Deciding to focus on something more positive, Luffy turned his attention to the rewards he had earned. Before checking out this upgrade token, let's do a system roll first, he said, using the first randomizer roll he had received. Congratulations. Custom Devil Fruit, Kiera no Mi, Model, Dabi received. Wait, did I really get this? No, more importantly, The fact that something like this exists is a huge deal. Luffy muttered in awe as he quickly retrieved the custom devil fruit from his inventory. He stared at the blue-colored fruit in his hand, scrutinizing it with curiosity and excitement-filled eyes. Raphael, what can you tell me about these custom devil fruits? Answer. Custom devil fruits are another twist that the randomizer system introduces to this world. The Kiera no Mi, or character fruit, gives the consumer the powers and memories related to the character the fruit is based on. Additionally, these custom devil fruits do not carry the curse of the sea or the restriction of only being able to eat one fruit. The system has increased the odds of receiving a custom devil fruit as a reward. However, the chance of getting a regular devil fruit is reduced by half. That sounds amazing, Luffy said, staring at the devil fruit with renewed greed. In that case, there should be no harm in eating this, right? He said as he imagined himself wielding blue flames that surpassed even those of characters like Endeavor. Notice. I would highly advise against eating this particular fruit. Huh? Why? Luffy asked, genuinely curious. He had assumed that eating this fruit would give him a significant boost in power, which his sentient super smart friend would greatly appreciate. Answer. Master, these custom devil fruits do indeed grant specific characters powers, but they also come with those characters' drawbacks. In this case, whoever consumes the Kiera no Mi model Daba will gain the ability to use the quirk, cremation, but unless the consumer already possesses significant resistance to fire, they will suffer the same kind of pain and burns that the individual Dabi experienced in his own world. Author's note. I know the official name for Dabi's quirk is Blue Flame, but I refuse to call it anything other than cremation, cause I think it sounds much cooler than its official name. So it's like that, huh? Luffy frowned, juggling the devil fruit in his hand. What if I use it with Haki? Answer. The flames from the quirk, cremation, are emitted from within the body itself. Using Haki will only reduce the pain to a certain extent, but the damage from burn marks will still occur. I see, Luffy sighed, staring at the devil fruit with a heavy heart. After a few moments of contemplation, he reluctantly returned it to his inventory. I really wanted to use those blue flames, but it can't be helped. If Raphael-sensei doesn't approve of something, then I better be careful about it, he said, feeling a strange wave of smug happiness fill his mind as if Raphael was feeling happy about him acknowledging her wisdom, but he knew better than to mention it since he knew that he will be told that it was his imagination. Luffy chuckled softly, shaking his head. I guess I'll just have to find someone who can use this fruit in the future. Then pushing the disappointment of his recent roll to the back of his mind, Luffy used his second randomizer roll. Congratulations. A regular Katana X1 received. Well, as expected, it's a dud once again. Luffy chuckled and stuffed the katana into his inventory. Now, let's see what this upgrade token is all about, he said, inspecting the upgrade token that had appeared as a reward. Upgrade token. A special gift rewarded to an individual named Gray by the guide after experiencing an extraordinary event that pleasantly entertained the crowd upstairs. This token can be used to upgrade one of the user's skills, be it system, boons, or regular abilities. Wow, this is even bigger than the custom devil fruit, Luffy murmured, impressed by the potential of the upgrade token. I guess the real choice is between upgrading the system and Raphael. He pondered for a moment before immediately deciding to upgrade his first boon, Lord of Wisdom, Raphael. While some might have advised more careful consideration, Luffy knew from experience that using just the basic version of Raphael was a gross underutilization of her abilities. Having seen what the full-powered, unrestricted Raphael could do, the decision was a no-brainer for him. Congratulations! Upgrade token is used to upgrade inherited boon, Lord of Wisdom, Raphael. Congratulations! 2 new abilities, all of creation and analytical appraisal, have been added to Lord of Wisdom, Raphael. This is big! Luffy exclaimed as he saw the message on the system screen, immediately examining the 2 new abilities. The first new ability, All of Creation, made Luffy incredibly glad he had chosen to use the upgrade token on Raphael. This ability allowed him to comprehend anything, as long as he had a basic understanding of it and it was perceivable to him. But what excited him even more was how All of Creation synergized with the second ability, Analytical Appraisal. This ability released waves that entered the target of analysis and performed a full scan of its composition. When combined, these two abilities meant that Luffy could potentially replicate any fighting move or technique as long as he could observe it with his own eyes and comprehend it through all of creation. Great, now I can easily learn advanced Haki even before leaving the East Blue. Luffy cheered, his excitement bubbling over. But his enthusiasm was quickly curbed as Raphael's voice echoed in his head. Notice, it is not possible to replicate advanced Haki unless it is directly observed or taught in detail by a credible teacher. Why can't you just use the smartphone to whip out that prison episode from the Wano arc where Luffy was taught inner destruction? Luffy asked, a little deflated. Answer. Master, the training showcased in manga or anime differs significantly from the real training required to master those techniques. The small details often omitted and could potentially harm the master's growth if caution is not exercised. I guess learning advanced Haki won't be as convenient as I thought. Luffy sighed. Does this apply to techniques from other anime as well? Answer. Indeed. However, I am still searching for ways to make the master stronger. It will take some time and research before anything substantial can be applied. Take your time, Luffy said, feeling more patient now. Time is one thing we have on our side for now. Answer. Don't worry, Master, you won't be disappointed. With that, Luffy felt his energy waning. He closed everything and lay back on his bed, letting his mind wander toward the future that lay ahead. Despite the terrifying encounter with Emu, he couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. Tomorrow, he would set sail with Uda, and their adventure would officially begin. He would finally be able to explore this world of seas and unique islands with his own eyes. However, the memory of helplessness he felt against that madwoman lingered at the back of his mind, reminding him of how powerless he truly was in the face of someone like Emu. But Luffy wasn't one to give up, even against an unbelievable opponent. The spirit and determination he had inherited from Luffy flared within him, fueling a resolve to one day pay her back for tricking him into that vow. As sleep began to overtake him, Luffy made a silent vow to himself. No matter what comes my way, I'll keep moving forward. I'll protect my friends, my family, and my crew with everything I have. And one day, I'll challenge that mad woman Emu for her throne and make her regret ever making that stupid vow with me. Not just to satisfy my ego but because I know that as long as she and her pawns run the world, there is no real freedom for me or anyone else. He vowed to himself, and the light of the moon silently glimmered on the straw hat beside him for a few moments before passing away into the night. However, at that moment Luffy wasn't aware that Raphael was even more frustrated by the encounter with Emu than he was. Born from the soul of her master, Raphael's primary goal was to protect him, and today's encounter had revealed just how helpless they were against the most powerful being in the world. At that moment, Raphael made a vow of her own. To make her master the strongest being in the world. And to achieve that, she knew she had to fulfill a goal of her own. I need to regain all my expected abilities and evolve into a Manas. To be continued. And the journey begins, Raphael. System. The next day, as soon as Luffy woke up, the first thing he did was check his status screen, half hoping that everything from last night had been a strange dream. However, much to his dismay, the new titles, The One Who Met the Sovereign, and The One Who Made the Sovereign Pact, were displayed clearly under the title tab. Luffy let out a deep sigh and rubbed his face, trying to shake off the unsettling memory of the encounter with Emu. So it wasn't just a nightmare. He muttered, feeling a lingering weight in his chest. There was no denying it now. He had made a binding vow with the most powerful being in the world, and there was no going back. After finishing his morning routine, Luffy stepped out of his room and immediately saw Uda darting around the house, buzzing with excitement. Rouge sat nearby, watching Uda's frantic movements with an exasperated yet amused expression on her face. Uda, please calm down before you knock something over, Rouge said, her voice a perfect mix of affection and exhaustion. I can't help it, I'm too excited, Uda squealed, barely containing her excitement as she dashed from one side of the room to the other, trying to find her personal stuff which had mysteriously, only for her scattered throughout the house. Luffy couldn't help but smile, the gloomy thoughts of last night fading away in the face of Uda's infectious energy. Looks like someone's ready to set sail, he teased, joining them. Uda skidded to a halt, her eyes lighting up even more at the sight of Luffy. Of course, I'm ready. We're finally setting off today. Luffy, our adventure is about to begin, she exclaimed, practically bouncing on her heels. I've been waiting for this for so long. Yeah, I can see that, Luffy chuckled, her enthusiasm starting to lift his spirits. Just don't forget anything in your whirlwind of excitement. That's why you're here, isn't it? Uda grinned mischievously. I'll check on the boat. And you handle my luggage, okay? It'll be safer in your storage space than bouncing around on the boat. Luffy raised an eyebrow but shrugged, knowing there was no point in arguing. Sure, I'll get your stuff. With that, Uda practically skipped out of the house, leaving Luffy and Rouge behind. I swear, I could build a generator powered by Uda's energy, Luffy joked, watching her dash out the door. If you did, it would power all of Fuchsia Village with her enthusiasm, Rouge giggled. But soon, the playful atmosphere shifted. Rouge's gaze softened, and she looked at Luffy with a mixture of pride and concern. Time flies, doesn't it? She said gently, her voice tinged with nostalgia. I still remember the day Garp dropped you here. You're such a loud brat. And now look at you, turning into a fine young man. Hey, I can still be a brat when I want to be. Luffy chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. Rouge smiled warmly, reaching out to gently caress his face. Good. I'd hate to see the child inside you disappear completely. She paused, her tone becoming serious. Luffy, I know I can't stop you and Uda from chasing your dreams out on the sea. Just like I couldn't stop Ace. But promise me you'll be careful. The world out there. It's more dangerous than you can imagine, she said as images of atrocities she saw during her pregnancy flashed before her eyes. Luffy could see the worry in her eyes, and it tugged at his heart. Hey, what's with the waterworks? He said gently, wiping a tear from her cheek. You don't need to worry so much. We'll be fine. I'm serious, Luffy, Rouge's voice trembled as she spoke. Please, be careful, she pleaded. You and Uda, you've become my children, just like Ace. After I lost Roger, I don't think I could bear losing any more of my family. Her voice broke as fresh tears welled in her eyes. Without hesitation, Luffy stood and pulled Rouge into a tight hug. You're such a worrywart, Rouge, he said softly, trying to ease her concerns. I promise you, I'll come back. I'll finish this journey, and I'll return with all the treasures and riches of the world, he added playfully, earning a small chuckle from her. And don't worry, I've changed a lot. I'm not as reckless as I used to be. I'll make sure we get through whatever comes our way safely. Rouge leaned into his embrace, her tears subsiding. I've seen how much you've grown this past year, she whispered. And I won't lie, I'm glad to see these changes in you. It puts my heart at ease, knowing that you're going to be there with her. Just take care of each other out there. Keep Uda out of trouble. That's the plan, Luffy said, smiling warmly. I'll live up to those expectations, I promise. Rouge finally pulled away, her eyes still glistening with unshed tears but now filled with pride. Good. Now, go on and get ready before Uda comes back and drags you out by the collar. Luffy chuckled. Yeah, I should. Thanks, Rouge, he said, turning to head to his room. As he walked away, Rouge called after him. I'll pack you and Uda some food for your journey. At least enough to last for a few days. Thanks, Rouge. You're the best, Luffy grinned, flashing her a thumbs up before disappearing into his room. Later that day, the residents of Fuchsia Village gathered at the port, their faces filled with a mixture of pride, excitement, and bittersweet farewells as they came to see off two of the village's most beloved teenagers. Luffy and Uda, who had grown up in the village and were known by everyone, were finally setting out on their long-awaited journey. Docked at the pier was a modest fishing boat with a single cabin. It wasn't much, but it was enough for their starting voyage. The boat belonged to Uda and Luffy, a simple vessel that reflected their current circumstances. It was all they could afford, but they had already decided they would replace it with a better ship later, whether through purchasing or possibly borrowing one from pirates or marines along the way. It's not much, but it'll do for now, Luffy said with a proud smile as he stood beside the boat. Not everyone starts with a grand pirate ship, Uda replied with a grin, giving him a playful nudge. Besides, it's the adventure that counts, not the boat. Yeah, I know, Miss Minnie Shanks. Luffy laughed. But a better boat would definitely be nice. As the pair bantered, the villagers approached one by one, offering advice and farewells. Makino, the local tavern owner who had watched them grow up and was almost like an elder sister to them, came over with a warm smile and handed Uda a neatly wrapped package of food. "Here, something for your journey," Makino said kindly, ruffling Luffy's hair as she handed the package to Uda. "You'll both need your strength out there." "Thanks, Makino," Uda beamed, accepting the package. "You're the best." Luffy gave her a grateful nod, though he quickly tried to fix his hair, looking slightly embarrassed. "I thought you'd bring drinks or something, but this will do." "Just remember, even though you've grown taller than me, I can still do this," she said, pinching his cheek. "And remember what I told you. I'll never serve alcohol to my younger brother no matter how old you are." Yeah, I get it," Luffy said, rubbing his cheek. A soft smile spread across his face as he continued, "Thanks, Makino. We'll come back with stories to tell and lots of treasure," he said, grinning wide. Makino smiled warmly. "I'll be waiting. Just make sure you come back safely. That's all I ask." The rest of the villagers echoed similar sentiments, cheering them on and reminding them to stay safe. There was an undeniable sense of pride in the air, as if the entire village was sending a piece of itself out to sea with the two adventurers. Even the old mayor, who had been vocal about his disapproval, presented them with pocket knives and urged them to be safe out there. Finally, Rouge approached, her eyes soft yet proud as she looked at Luffy and Uda. She had packed them a few days' worth of food earlier, but now that the moment had come, she back tears once more. "Take care of each other," she said softly, hugging both Luffy and Uda, "and remember, no matter how far you go, you'll always have a home here." "Don't worry, we'll be back before you know it," Uda said cheerfully, though her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "And we'll bring back tons of cool stuff." "Yeah, we'll make you and the entire village proud, Rouge," Luffy added, his voice more serious as he returned the hug. "Thanks for everything." As the final goodbyes were exchanged, Luffy and Uda climbed aboard their fishing boat. The villagers waved and called out their well wishes from the docks. The boat rocked gently on the water as Luffy untied the ropes, his heart pounding with excitement. "Hey, what about Dayton? Is she not coming?" Uda asked, scanning the crowd. "Well, you know how she is," Luffy said, pointing to an alley where three figures were peeking out, trying to hide. When they noticed Luffy pointing at them, they quickly made a poor attempt at hiding their presence, getting a chuckle out of Luffy and Uda. "Don't worry, I left a letter with Ruff, with our thanks and goodbyes." "That was very thoughtful of you," Uda said, smiling at him. "Anyway, ready to set sail, Uda?" Luffy asked, turning to his sister with a wide grin. "You bet I am." Uda grinned back, her eyes gleaming with excitement as she took the helm. "Let's get this adventure started." With one last wave to the villagers, Luffy and Uda set off from the dock. The fishing boat slowly drifted away from the shore, gaining speed as it ventured into the open sea. "So it's finally begun," Uda said, watching the village shrink in the distance. "Hey, what's that?" she asked as she noticed Luffy pulling a bottle from his inventory. "Wait a moment," Luffy said, pouring 2 glasses. "This is sake to celebrate the start of our journey," he said, handing her one of the glasses. "What do you say? Want to toast?" "You bet I do," Uda replied. "On the count of 3. 3, 2, 1, to our dreams," they both shouted, clinking their glasses together. "Congratulations! New achievement, and the journey begins, unlocked, to be continued."